everyone. In the previous video, I have talked about the course I'm currently teaching, which is Introduction to Teaching Methods. We have said the course covers 5 chapters, dealing with different teaching approaches and practices. Today, we are going to dive into the second chapter entitled Competency-Based Language Teaching. So, let's start. First, we will introduce the objectives of the course. Then, we will start by defining the competency-based approach and the concept of competency. The next point is to explain the rationale behind introducing competency-based language teaching in the Algerian context. We will cover both the basic and supporting competencies targeted in the curriculum. Then we will shift our attention to constructivism, its key features, and the notion of zone of proximal development. The last point covers the teaching procedure or the constructivist classroom. So at the end of this lecture, the students will be able to identify the theoretical foundations of the competency-based approach, understand the key concepts such as competency, task, constructivism, zone of proximal development, to explain the rationale behind integrating CBLT to English as a foreign language teaching in Algeria, and to recognize the basic and the supporting targeted competencies. First, you should know that CBLT derives its principles and characteristics from the competency-based approach. It is based on linking learning carried out at school to varied and relevant contexts in use, in order to make learning useful and sustainable. In other words, the focus moves from what students know about the language to what they can do with it. They should perform real-life tasks. Competency is a key word here. It is defined as the ability to act using a range of skills and knowledge in various situations that differ from those in which they were learned. To get it well, I invite you to examine this example. You have this specific competency, that is, make a telephone call to an office to complain about a service. Okay, this is, let's say, a situation, a real-life situation that anyone can encounter. And here you have the skills needed to perform the task, the different or the range of abilities that your students should develop in the classroom when performing the task in order to attain that specific competency that you have stated here. Make a telephone call and also complaining about a service. Okay, for example, you have the ability to read and understand telephone numbers, the ability to identify oneself when answering. So all these are abilities, range of abilities that your student should work in classroom to develop their skills, okay, in order to attain that specific competency. In the Algerian English curriculum, language is viewed as a set of interacting competencies. Therefore, the ability to use the language as a listener, speaker, reader, and writer is crucial in the goals of the curricula. In other words, teachers should work on the know-how, and the know-to-be of their students, making bridges between what they are learning in classroom and their experiences in the society. The Of the curriculum are stated in form of competencies. You have the basic language competencies. The first one, it is the interactive competence. It is the ability to use the language either orally or in its written form to interact with others in order to create social relations, express needs, understand and address needs of others, and to get things accomplished. The second competence, it is the interpretive. Here we mean by interpretive competence the ability to understand written language through reading or spoken language through listening and to interpret it appropriately. The third competence, it is the productive one. It is the ability to produce coherent, appropriate, and relevant messages in writing or speaking. It is also the ability to effectively express ideas and organize thoughts appropriately. On the other hand, you have a set of supporting competencies. The first one is the linguistic competency that is related to the mastery of grammar, pronunciation, and the vocabulary needed in a given situation. And then you have the language learning strategies, which is related to techniques that help students to acquire, remember, organize, and use information on an ongoing basis. Competency-based language teaching derives its principles from constructivism. It is both a learning theory and a philosophy of education that suggests learners actively build their knowledge through experiences and interactions. According to this theory, education should focus on problem solving and critical thinking, encouraging learners to connect new information with prior knowledge. It emphasizes student-centered learning, where teachers guide rather than direct, fostering deep understanding and application. The key features that underlies the constructivist approach are active knowledge construction. Learners aren't passive recipients of information. Instead, they construct knowledge by relating new ideas to prior experiences and frameworks. Then, meaning making. Knowledge is not simply transmitted, it is interpreted and understood in the context of each learner's existing worldview. Then, it is learner-centered approach. The learner's perspective, interest, and cultural background plays a significant role in shaping the learning process. Rather than passively receiving information, learners reflect on their experiences, create mental representations, and incorporate new knowledge into their schemas. This promotes deeper learning and understanding. The zone of proximal development is an important concept in constructivism. It is a concept in educational psychology introduced by Vygotsky. It represents the space between what a learner is capable of doing and supported and what the learner cannot do even with support. It is the range where the learner is able to perform, but only with support from a teacher or a peer with more knowledge or expertise. This person is known as the more knowledgeable other. Now let's have a look to what happens in classroom. In a constructivist classroom, learning is evolving. Students learn from their errors. Learning is collaborative. Pair and group work is encouraged because students can learn with peer. Learning is reflective. Self-assessment is encouraged and students are encouraged to reflect on what they learned. Learning is active. It is learning by doing and performing tasks, so students are active participants. Learning is constructed because students' prior knowledge serves as the foundation for the new knowledge they will generate. You have a short quiz to practice what you have learned previously. Thank you for watching.